Welcome, this is Ahmed Zidane greeting you from city of Turku in Finland, presenting this special interview with a wonderful English poet, Andy Willoughby. Welcome as a dear guest in Turku.
It's nice to be in Turku. I always like to come here. Yeah.
Is this your first time you have visited Finland?
No, I've been here many, many times. Since 1999 it was the first time I came to see friends. And then I met, my friends introduced me to musicians who introduced me to poets. So then from 2000, I've been coming here and performing my poetry and bringing Finnish poets to England also.
What's the first impression you have taken about Finland?
I felt Turku was a very cultural town, and I was impressed with the cafes and the university atmosphere. And when I first came, it was Easter, so it was very cold still, and there was lots of snow. And I liked it very much from the beginning. But then the second time I came here was the summer, and then for the Down by the Laituri festival. And yeah, I fell in love with the archipelago and the beautiful nature here. And since then, I've been to see lots of lakes and lots of the natural features of Finland, which I really love. And then I've really connected with the Finnish culture in a deeper way by reading Kalevala and studying the mythology of Finland. And so I produced a book with another poet, Bob Beagrie, where we were writing from the themes of the Finnish Kalevala, Sampo, which is now in Finnish, Savakaidas Press in Finnish as well as English. So I feel like a deep connection with Finland. It's really been a country whose like culture and deep folk culture has really inspired me. You had just call me Andrew. Nobody is allowed to call me Andrew. My name is Andy. Only my mother could call me Andrew when she was angry. When my mother was angry, she would say, "Andrew, have you thought about what you're doing?" And I would say, "No, I'm a moron. I didn't think about it at all. I'm sorry, Mom." Well, let's go. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? I found this stick, I'm very impressed. Are you ready? The guys behind me. The guys behind me ready. Are you ready?
Yes.
Are you more ready? No, this side's got to be more ready than that side. That side's excellent. Are you ready?
Yeah!
Are you ready?
Yeah!
Oh, well, are you ready behind me?
Yeah!
Well, let's go. Okay. The first poem is about my friend who's a gangster. Because I come from Middlesbrough, you know, so I have a few friends who are gangsters. In fact, my career choices were very simple. It was poet or gangster. So I wasn't very good at being a gangster, so I became a poet. But it was interesting because the guy who lived next door to me, he became a gangster. And his brother became an engineer, and he works for like aerospace or something. He works in Detroit, but his brother is a gangster. But I love his brother, so I wrote him a poem. I thought I would write this boy a poem. No one is ever going to write him a poem, right? So I wrote him a poem. And his name is Peter. But because there was lots of Peters in my street, so he was called Big Peter. So this poem is call and response, African style. Because I have a very good friend who's an African poet, and he taught me how to do this. So you have to be in this poem. So this side of the room, you have the word big.
Big.
No, that's shit. Again, big!
Big.
I mean, it's big.
Big.
You have Peter.
Peter.
I think you guys have to have big as well, because they're so bad. So let's go.
Which side are we?
I think I'm going to join you in with the big people because they're not loud enough. So, them and you, but not them, shout big. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Go!
Big.
Oh, we're there.
Peter.
All right, we're there. And every time I do that, that's what you do. So it's very simple. So here's a poem for Big Peter, who never read a poem in his life. And certainly didn't think that anybody would write a poem about him. And this is my poem that I like to start everything with. Okay, here we go. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Big.
Oh, with that. Peter. Okay, that's good, isn't it? Okay, let's go. Okay. The clumsy kid of little words broke my best Robin Hood sword.
Peter.
He drove my sledge through the old school hedge.
Peter.
He slapped the trigger off my pop gun. He lit fires when I told him to for fun.
Peter.
He necked the crow that we rescued when its wing just wouldn't glue.
Peter.
He was knuckle-fisted and handed. He dented the ground when he landed. Oh. He collected insects, knives and sticks. He drank low cops pop when he was sick. He grew bigger than the dad who went away. He practiced on his punch bag every day.
Peter.
He helped my old man wash his car when I stayed in to play guitar.
Peter.
He didn't read the books like me. He stole the apples from the trees.
Peter.
He went to Boston at 13. He said in prison it was a scream.
Peter.
He gave me my first coke on a spliff. He taught me that deep purple riff. Dum dum dum. Dum 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 dum. Big Peter. He saved his best grin for me, mammy. Pushed my sister in her pram.
Peter.
He gave me a rep for seeing red. Just one punch could knock you dead.
Peter.
He shoved me a gun under his floor. I didn't ask what it was for.
Peter.
He kept himself free most of the time on the edge of violent crime.
Peter.
He packed in Robin, took up Shylock, and he kicks indoors now without knocking. I hope you like my set of poems, because I'll tell you something, I still know him.
Peter.
And I'll send him round your house if you don't fucking listen to me, okay? After that, I feel I should read a little poem about where I come from to explain my relationship with gangsters. And I'm going to ask Mr. Kalinini Kangas to read it with me in Finnish, line by line. I come from Middlesbrough, and I don't know if you saw this, but we were once the biggest steel building town in the world. Everybody thinks of steel and they think of Sheffield, right? But Sheffield made knives and forks. We built the rail track of the Trans-Siberian Express. My grandfather built Sydney Harbour Bridge. That's all made from Middlesbrough steel. But it was very interesting because when the iron miners came to Middlesbrough, nobody was living there originally. We found iron in the hills. And the population went from 30 people to 150,000 people in the 19th century. But the miners were very amusing people, you know, the Irish and Welsh and Scottish. And they called Eston California. This is the place where the hill was in Middlesbrough with the steel. They called it California. So I grew up in California. But I was thinking about this and I wrote this book of mine. It's called The Wrong California. I grew up in the wrong California. So, Vara, California.
From California.
We come from the wrong California.
Me tulemme väärästä Kaliforniasta.
No one but the Iron Masters made their fortunes here.
Vain kaivosherrat takoivat rahaa täällä.
The masses that huddled here for work did not come for liberty but survival.
And as I know, you have written recently a poem to Turku.
Yeah, and this time I wrote a poem to Turku, yeah, to say thank you, really, but also in the midst of my poem to Turku was about how I was made to feel very welcome as a stranger here originally, and it's in the spirit of asking that strangers always be welcomed here, especially in the midst of the immigration crisis now and the problems that are happening across Europe. But yeah, it's also a love poem to Turku and the Turku people.
So it's for Vincent. For Vincent, your letters to Theo, they kept me going through the dishwasher building site hotel funky years. And when I was crunching grammar and usage for others through night and day shifts, most of them in those ephemeral London shit-paid occupations, I come from Middlesbrough,
It's no more ridiculous for me to write than for you to paint and get nowhere. In the material world, swapping absinthe for whiskey, scribbling notes and journals in one-sink bedsits, stinking of cabbage and labourers' socks. With the punk neighbours screaming at each other after too much cider, and still hanging on to the notion of the dignity of the workers and the possibilities of the quality of the light. He was one of Nigeria's most important poets, and he died of cancer about 6 years ago. And now everybody in Nigeria's got all these famous awards and everything. But when he was alive, they told him, if you don't leave, we're going to kill you. So he came to England and met me. So I wrote my poem for him. In Nigeria, he was called the Minstrel, and he used to perform on Little Hill. And thousands of people used to come and watch him perform his poetry. And that's why the government didn't like him. So I read this poem to the Nigerian ambassador in London. It was quite interesting moment. Okay, this is for the Minstrel, Esiaba. And I based it on Neruda, Pablo Neruda poem. So you probably recognize it. Okay.
Now we will talk about your poetic beginnings. How was your beginnings?
I wrote poems at school, but I didn't really think of myself as a poet. And you know, I come from quite a working class background, and poetry wasn't part of my everyday culture. Although I always loved poetry when I read it at school, and but I really connected with it. I really started connecting more strongly with poetry during the period of like punk rock in England, because this at that time there started to be a lot of performance poets. Then you could see them on TV, or you could buy records. So I heard John Cooper Clarke, who was with the punk movement doing poetry, and I heard reggae poetry from Jamaican poets, and I thought, yeah, this is something you can do live, and it was very exciting to me. And then when I went to university, I got to meet poets in workshops, which I think is really important. And so then I began to perform it more. Originally, I wanted to be a rock and roll star, but I wasn't a very good guitarist. And also, the bands, we could never keep a band going. So I was writing lots of like lyrics for songs. And then I decided, no, I can write poems. I just need me to write a poem.
You have started with playing on guitar.
Yeah, I play guitar as well, but I used to sing with bands sometimes and write the songs for the bands. But yeah, I just when I didn't have a band, I decided, okay, I could just write poetry. And then later I started working with musicians again, but as a poet, not as a songwriter. And I still really like to work with musicians, and part of coming to Finland has been connecting some English musicians with some Finnish musicians, and there's some Finnish musicians here that I've been working with for all this time, for 15 years now. And in Helsinki on Tuesday, I'll be performing with Masi Hukkari, who I worked with a long time ago here when he was a student in the music academy, I think. And now he's a rock star, you know. So it's still, but he's a great jazz musician too. So it's very interesting for us to work together.
Have you been influenced by some writers?
Have I been influenced by? Yeah. Well, those performance poets that I was talking about before, who worked a lot with music, like John Cooper Clarke and Linton Kwesi Johnson, the black poet, and Benjamin Zephaniah. They influenced me in performance style, but then I have lots of influences of writers. I'm influenced by a northern English poet called Tony Harrison, because he writes a lot about working class life, and I could connect to that. But then I'm also very influenced by the American poets, by the beat movement, by Allen Ginsberg, because I found a lot of freedom in that was interesting to me. And Charles Bukowski. I read a lot of Charles Bukowski when I was younger. I liked the freedom of the voice, and the way he would look at he would look at subjects that other people wouldn't look at in the underground, on the edges of society, and that interested me. But then I read all the time, so I've got a lot of poets who've influenced me. In Finland, I've been influenced a lot by the poetry scene here, and the way the poets perform, and I found a lot of shared influences and shared ways of working with Esa Hirvonen and Tapani Kinnunen and Galin Kangas especially. We're quite similar poets. In that way, I'm almost a poet of the Turku school because we have the same influences and we like the idea of performing in the same way. I was also influenced a lot by the famous Irish writer Seamus Heaney, because when I was at university I won a scholarship to go to Ireland and I studied with Heaney, and there's a line in one of his essays where he says poetry happens when your roots cross with your reading, and I agree with that, and that's something that I've tried to do in my poetry, to explore where I come from, my hometown, and connect it to the poets that I like, and really connect to like location, and that comes from my study of Heaney and other Irish. I'm influenced quite a lot by Irish poets as well as English poets.
What speech and ideas do you adopt in your poetry?
Well, I don't really start a poem with an idea. I usually start a poem with a feeling or a phrase. It depends really. Sometimes if I'm reacting to public events and writing that kind of poem, then obviously it's about I'm always trying to respond with humanity to public events, and if I feel, but it's still a feeling. If I feel very angry about something, I write a poem. But more often poetry comes from, just some little thing starts to connect with you, like an image or a sound, and then I work from that outwards. And I quite often work organically with like free verse, but sometimes I will write in set forms if it helps me get deeper into the subject.
What's
And I like
more closer to you?
I work more in a free way, but I like to use the stanza and to create my form, and it's for me quite often the spoken word comes first and then I work on the written word, but not always, and I quite often find myself writing about themes that stay with me all my life. So obviously I write about love like every other poet, and in my own way. And then, but I also I have certain things like elemental themes because I come from a steel town. I often find iron gets into my poetry somehow. Strange connections with metal, and I've been to like Iron Age sites in Finland, in Russia, and I grew up near one, and I become very interested in the way that people react with landscape and with the materials that they use. That's a lot in my poetry, a lot.
To what extent your city influenced you as a poet?
Yeah, I think massively. When I was young, I wouldn't have thought that, but because I left it and went to university and then started thinking about it, and I went home. I went home with. I went home after working in Ireland with Seamus Heaney, thinking that when I was young, I used to think that exciting things happened everywhere else, but then I realised that it's in your own neighbourhood you can find the universal, or you can find the things that you can find. I think to write a good poem, you have to connect with something both consciously and unconsciously. And if you're writing from your home landscape or your home atmosphere or the history of the place, then you start to make those connections because you feel it very deeply. So in that way, I write about home a lot. Other times, I like to travel and write about where I'm travelling. But I'm still always making connections and comparisons, and part of the discourse that runs through you is the discourse of where you come from. And you've really got, Bob Marley said, you've got to know your history if you want to know where you're coming from. And so I've studied my local history a lot, and the landscape and the industry. And I come from this post-industrial town that was once a big steel town, and obviously it affected me in a deep way because I saw all the industry fall away, people lose their jobs, and so I become the social concerns in my poetry. I come from a town that's seen as peripheral, and so that's given me, I think, an interest in other people who are marginalised, and that's in my work a lot. because I understand that, because I've seen that, and through seeing the industry fall apart and the unemployment, and then researching the history of my town, and knowing that like Middlesbrough was a very small village, but they became a very big town very quickly, because they discovered the iron in the hills. Everybody came there to work. Mm-hmm. So everybody in the history of Middlesbrough is an economic migrant. And so when I read those words used insultingly in the press, it makes me very angry, but also it's just ignorance. People, throughout history, humanity is economic migrant. People go to the work. And right now that's concerning me a lot, that we don't allow prejudices and inhumanity and fear to rule us. You know, it's not. And being a poet's not about that. Being a poet, you find your common humanity. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I'm a British poet and I'm a Middlesbrough poet, but for me, you know, when you're a poet and you go into lots of international festivals and meeting other artists, I don't meet someone and think, the first thing I think is he Iraqi? Is he Kurdish? Is he Finnish? I'm just meeting a human being, you know. And then I get very interested in all the cultural differences. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of my poetry now, actually. And I'm like really interested in identity and how we construct identity.
Mm-hmm. What kind of poetry you perform when you go to international platform?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I try to find the poems that I think have the most connection with the audience at the time, and if it's not so much of the international platform, it's also when you're on in a show, or where you are. So if you're in a loud cabaret type bar, then I would perform my more rhythmical performance poems that are really boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom. Yeah, a little bit more, because you have to get the attention of the audience. But then I also, and I might think about ones that have slightly more simple language. But then also, I think it's always important to read what you're feeling passionate about at the time, because the audience can see your passion, even if they don't understand every word. It's important for a poet to read out of, you know, what they're most deeply connected to.
Prime, you come drumming. Banging through the buzz of humbug, silencing the moronic, over ruined dreams of independence, over the fields of the Civil War dead, over the hidden corpses soaked in oil and covered up by shell, full of dollars. You come drumming in your fine robes, with your pounding feet and your thrusting hips, with your raucous laugh and your righteous howl of laughter. You come drumming, beating out a warning to the beasts of Sandhurst, to the British Empire, dragging into the light the secret police with their cowardly meals of ground glass and mashed potato, their Colombian neckties. You reduce the roar of tyrants into the buzz of dirty little mosquitoes. You compose your dance of rebellion and unstoppable human joy. You come drumming. Over the fields of middle age, over the fearful desert, over unspeakable silence of loss, over the graves of poor mothers and poverty-emasculated fathers, over the stilled rivers of molten steel, over the waters of the Tees, the Our, the Thames, the Mersey, the Niger, all the world's rivers, over pipelines greased with sweat and human blood. You come drumming and singing of revolution, of love, of sexual joy, of the pleasure and fire in great poetry, of early Welcott and Neruda, of Soyinka, of Guevara, of Brecht's first anarchic ballads, of oxtail soup and the best kind of chili, of good curry with rice and peas, drowning out the drone of the conformists. the vicious rumble of the bigots, cancelling out the hum of the vacuum of infinite space, demanding a place at all the parties to celebrate freedom. You will never able to be attended again, ensuring we will sing your songs, and we will dance with you, and we will dance with you, and we will dance with you.
Do you travel a lot?
I travel a lot, but not as much as I would like to travel. Because I've got my job in the university at home and working on a lot of projects as a working writer. But I am lucky and I get to travel quite a bit, especially with poetry.
The farthest place that you have been?
Well, I taught in Japan when I was younger. I taught English in Japan. But I also did some poetry there, working with an artist. But I went there as an English teacher. And then I've also been to Khanty-Mansiysk in Siberia. And I went along with some Finnish poets for a Fenugreek conference, because I was very interested in the Fenugreek ethnicity and the myths and legends and stories. So I went all the way to Siberia, and my next book's about that trip. I'm writing a book about traveling to Siberia with Finnish poets, but I'm reflecting back and forward between the landscape at home and the Russian landscape and the feeling of travelling through this very historical landscape into the wilderness.
How much can traveling add on your own poetic experiment or experience?
Well, for me, traveling is vital to expanding your consciousness. It's vital not just because you see these new cultures and new places, you also see where you come from in a different perspective, and you see the things that are common in humanity, and you also see the cultural differences and some of the things that you take for granted at home. You realise are social, and formed by the society that you live in. So you question it, and that's a really good thing. And I also think when you travel, the best poems come when they seem to float up from inside you somehow, or when they come from somewhere else. And it's vital for an artist to be able to access the unconscious, or to loosen the barrier between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And like the French symbolist poets and the decadent poets in England, they did that through drugs and alcohol and all this kind of thing to try to shake up the senses. But you don't have to. Traveling is another really good way of doing that, and so is meditation, and you can do it at home. But I think when you travel, you instantly you're seeing other languages and different sounds, and it really loosens your way with your own language. And it gives you different points of comparison that are really, really vital, I think, to my work anyway.
What is your own special boundaries? How do you see the boundaries in your own work?
I don't know if I have any. I mean, the things that hold me in are the things the area that I see as mine. Well, no, I see myself as a citizen of the world, really. But obviously I have the same boundaries that are to do with safety and where you can go as a poet. I'm lucky enough to come from a society where as a poet you've got freedom of speech mostly, and also nobody arrests you or kills you for your poetry. So I guess I'm also bound by, like, some of my political poetry. I couldn't do it in certain countries, I wouldn't be allowed. And so there's that kind of boundary. Yeah, projects. Well, I'm involved in a lot of projects. Because I'm a working writer, and that doesn't mean just writing. It means, for me, it means being socially active as well and working lots of educational ways. And I work often as a playwright as well as a poet, but I often write plays with social groups about their lives and put them in and show the plays in unusual places, or maybe work with the theatre. But then I've written plays with the homeless but then I've also encouraged young people to start doing drama and working with new writers. So I'm always involved in projects like that. I work I have an independent press and literature development agency with my friend Bob Beagrie. And we work on lots of different projects with various marginalised groups. And at the moment we're looking to work with on projects that are about integrating refugees with local population through writing, because I think it's very important work at the moment. And we're in the middle of proposing some projects. And we're just finishing a project. We've had our own big tour with our work at the moment, the one that's based on the Finnish mythology. But then we also just brought out a book called Intercity Flow that came out of a year-long project where we had poets in London, Middlesbrough and in Europe working with each other, and working with younger poets and mentoring them. And then we did a lot of shows on Teesside, and we the idea was to make our hometown a junction for London poets and European poets, so that we were no longer a periphery outside of London, but the place where people were meeting. Because I thought it was quite important to me and to Bob. And that was a very successful project. We brought Danish poets, French poets, Finnish poets, and poets from Finland. Yeah, and it was Danish, French, Finnish, London, Dutch poets. And we all worked together and we made a book at the end. And that was a really nice project. We launched it at the London Literature Festival.
What is the nature of this project?
It was just looking at successful poets who were making a living from performing and working on social projects, and to get them to mentor a younger poet in their hometown, and then mentoring the younger poet in both writing and performing skills, and then we're all looking together at what everybody's doing in each country. So it was a real international collaboration project. Our press specialises in publishing poetry or creative writing that comes from collaborative projects or from social projects. So I'm often involved in that. I'm also involved in organising a festival in Middlesbrough called the T-Junction Festival. I'm on the committee for that, and it's every other year. We did the first one 2 years ago, and we're bringing poets from all over the world to that festival. And the next one is next April. So I'm heavily involved in that at the moment. And then I'm often doing work with schools, you know, around it can be all sorts of work with all kinds of schools. Sometimes, recently I've been doing a lot of work about World War I history with children, and we wrote a play, Bob and I, with a group of children, and then we put it on in the theatre in Redcar, in Teesside, where I'm from, and then we've been into schools to do writing about the history of the war and what it was like to be a soldier, and what it was like to be at home, and raising consciousness of anti-war consciousness. That's why we do it, but it's so people understand their history and their heritage. And I'm involved in a lot of projects that are about teaching local heritage to the children where I live.
What is the most controversial poem you have written?
I don't know.
In your opinion?
I don't pay attention to what people say about it, but it's probably
So
that's
one that you always
it's probably my Love Me, Love
perform
My...
it.
It's my Love Me, Love My bomb poem. Because obviously
I would say that.
the title's ironic, because I'm referring to the American country music song that went Love Me, Love My Dog. But I'm satirising the idea that you can spread peace and love and democracy through bombs. So obviously, but it's controversial, and originally it was very much about American foreign policy, but then I've expanded it over the years because it's really about, when I perform it live I add verses, I improvise them, but because it's always against anybody who thinks that you can bomb people into thinking like you. You can't bomb people into thinking like you.
Yes, how old this poem is?
I wrote it a long time ago. Maybe it was '98 when I wrote it. And and then as every situation, international situations happened, and then the terrorism's happened, it's taken on a new residency. It's not my favourite of my poems because it's very didactic, but it carries a meaning for audiences, and they always seem to like it. And it's very rhythmic, and I'm using rap rhythms. Because I want, it's simplistic because the message is quite simple, really. But then I also try to make it slightly funny in a satirical way. So I guess that would be the most controversial of my poems. When I first wrote it, after a while I was worried that it would just seem like anti-American, because I'm not anti-America. I love America. There's lots of things I love about American society and culture, but it was really about American foreign policy that you know, which is a different thing. And then, but then it applies to any government that wants to impose its will on people by dropping bombs on them, or any group. You know, it's an anti-violence poem, really. So over the years, I've tried to develop it to make sure that it's not just perceived as anti-American, you know, because I'm not anti-American. I'm anti policies that about imperialism or fundamentalism or anything where you think you can impose your will on other people by violence, you know, because you can't.
Well, I'm going to read a very old poem now because unfortunately it's still relevant and it's just got like a fun.
Yeah.
So what with this one? I'll just read that one. Love my bomb, it's got pictures of McDonald's on. Eat the burger, eat the bun, collect the Space Wars plastic gun. Love me, love my bomb. Love it cause it's right, it never will be left. Love it cause it leaves the troublesome bereft. Love it cause it's first world, top of the pile. It can teach a dispossessed to ferret and smile. It's got pictures of John Wayne on, making money down the barrel of a gun. Makes the economy number one. Love me, love my bomb. Love me, love my bomb. Love it cause he's smart, he can ride a horse. Love it cause he knows how to hit a little cross. Love it cause he's clever in his high-tech head. Sometimes the cross is white man, sometimes it's red. Love me, love my bomb. It's got pictures of pretty girls on. It can sing a freedom song. It loves its country, right or wrong. Love me, love my bomb. Love me, love my bomb. Love it cause it's long, shiny and smooth. Love it cause it pays, it makes stock markets move. Love it cause it costs taxpayers dollars. It can employ 100,000 white collars. Love me, love my bomb. It's got pictures of Captain Turku on. It's got the power of exploding suns. It never sets its phases on stun. Love me, love my bomb. Love me, love my bomb. Love it, love it, love it. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, because it's big, it can make a massive bang of an all good rock. Terrorist stand, stop and kill women for dressing a room. Or is it cause it's sitting on the price of crude? Love me, love my bomb. It's got pictures of Mickey Mouse on. It can whistle a happy tune and stuff it through your kid's bedroom. Love me, love my bomb. War, what is it good for? Oil companies, tertiary reality gamers, sadistic jailers, reconstruction contracts, secret societies within the government, elections through fear, oil contracts, mass distraction, last call buglers, coffin makers, undertakers, prosthetic limb manufacturers. War! What is it good for? Different skin, same old song. Love me, love my bomb. It's got pictures of Tony Blair on. It's got pictures of Putin on. It's got pictures of Holland on. Love me, love my bomb. Love me, love my bomb.
What is your opinion about social media?
Yeah, I think social media is fascinating. It has two aspects, though, in a way it can be used. It's a battle between freedom and propaganda, like all new mediums. So some people will use it for propaganda, and but also it creates an alternative to the. in England it's very interesting because we've had this tabloid press for so long that is predominantly right-wing and jingoistic and imperialistic and simplistic. But then I think social media suddenly allows news to be reported in without a filter, in an honest, more honest way sometimes. I think it's a really good democratic tool, social media. And also you can the politicians have started to use it now, but at least you can, the ones who use it really well, like Jeremy Corbyn, you can see what he's thinking because he's saying what he's thinking.
Is that social media your platform for publishing?
I don't. It's not necessarily my favourite platform for publishing, but I think it works with traditional publishing very well. You can. It's good to put one poem up and link it to a book and to your publishing site, so people can still buy the print medium or download the Kindle. And but I think there's been some interesting experiments with Twitter poems, and occasionally, if I'm travelling, I'll post a poem on Facebook that I might work on later, from my point of view. And but I don't think it's not necessarily the greatest publishing platform. If you think about Facebook, for example, if I post a picture of me being kissed by a dog, it will get like 1,000 likes. And I might publish a poem that's from my heart, and sometimes it'll get nobody will read it, you know. So I think it depends if you catch the moment or not. If you write something, you know, like last time I wrote a poem on Facebook was during the refugee crisis when all those pictures of the little boy drowned on the beach came up, and then a lot of people read that and it went viral, and that was great because I wanted to say something. I wanted to say something because I was feeling something very profound, and I just wanted to say my reaction to this because it was terrible.
Can you tell us some from this?
I don't have it with me, but...
what you can remind?
Well, I was just, in my poem, it struck me about the boy's shoes, you know, he was wearing these beautiful trainers, and so it struck me the common humanity of everyone trying to buy nice shoes for the children, and you don't expect to see them drowned and washed up on beaches. And it was about getting people to think about their common love for their children, and that all children only see other human beings, you know, they don't see nationalities, or they see other human beings and they're innocent, you know. And so I reacted to that, and I put a poem out, and a lot of people, you know, I let people use it to campaign for money for refugees with and everything. So that social media for that was vital, that idea that something would go viral. So I think social media can work quite well if you want to put something out there that's topical. And if it's connected to like a good cause, or you're trying to help people, then it's a very, very useful platform. If you're just trying to constantly publish poetry on it, then I think less and less people will read it, in a way. And I think people like the physical object of the book still very much. So otherwise I wouldn't publish them. So I think it's a very useful tool, but it's like any tool. It's how you use it. But I think my generation especially have a responsibility to get on top of social media. And teachers in university, I don't think technology is not used well enough in schools yet. You can really use it. And like I've worked on projects with kids who wouldn't normally write poems, so I've let them write a poem on their mobile phones, sending it back and forward as text. I've experimented with in mine and Bob Beagre's Sample Heading Further North book. It's our reaction to Stories of the Cleverer. We wrote some poems separately, some poems together, but we wrote some poems where we sat back to back on different computers, and I took one voice and he took another, and then we're shooting them back and forward in the moment spontaneously. And so I think those kind of experiments are really interesting, and it's like they're new forms, or it's a new way of working. It's very good for collaborative work, social media. You can have a few people working on a text spontaneously. I'm interested in that and developing that a little bit. But obviously, I have to get on top of the technology. It's like, at my age, you have to work hard at that. So I do, you know. I'm lucky I've got a wife who's very good at that kind of thing, so she teaches me a lot.
Where is your poetic speciality? Have you got your dreams?
That's a difficult question because I didn't really... I don't know if I really had some big dream of winning some big poetry prize or this kind of thing. I never really cared about that. The idea is nice, but all I ever wanted from poetry was to be able to perform it, to have it published, and to help to put it out there, you know. And I do that, so it's enough. Obviously, I'd like to keep doing it and now it's different though. What I really like is collaboration, and where lots of poets meet together and working with other poets. In kind of literary ambitions, well, now I'm working on a very long poem, and I've always wanted to try that. I still have some ambitions in writing some drama, or maybe mixed drama that uses poetry, and to have it put on in a big theatre would be really nice now. So I might concentrate a little bit on drama next again. And it might be that it's first drama, or it might just be, you know, standard drama or experimental drama. But I don't have some dream of winning some big prize. I don't want to win. It's nice if you do, but it's not why I do it. And poetry's already given me the greatest gift, which is allowing me to go and live a cosmopolitan lifestyle, meeting lots of different people, and sharing ideas. I mean, what's nicer than that? It's not about money, you know. I wrote a poem a long time ago called Poetry, There's No Money in That. And a lot of the Finnish publishers in poetry really like that poem. Because of course, you don't do it for money, but you can get, what it can bring you is residencies and travel and communication and maybe teaching. But I think poetry is primal. You write it to communicate because you want to communicate. And that's the dream, really, to communicate with as many people as possible.
How do you identify poetry, and what is modernism in your opinion?
Oh, that's a big question. I don't know if I can. I think I'd identify poetry as the most primal form of writing, the one you need to do the most, but it's also one of the most difficult crafts. And somewhere between those two poles, poetry lies. I would define poetry as I don't know if I'd like to define it, but it's you're always trying to bridge the gap in poetry between deep emotion and articulation, and also the joy of language. I think the joy of language needs to be in poetry, as well as the message of language. That's the difference. Sometimes in prose, of course you could take a joy in language, but in poetry you have the most heightened sense of the joy of language, I think.
Modernity.
Modernity. Well, we have to ask ourselves, don't we, if we're postmodern or just still modernists? That's a big question. Okay, for me, modernism is a reaction against mass culture. It's an attempt to maintain a high culture in the face of a mass culture. On one level. Now, on that level, I wouldn't say I was a modernist. I'm a postmodernist. I think I value language and culture that comes from other angles than this high academic culture. I've always been influenced by the lyrics of popular music. I'm very interested in the old music hall tradition, the variety tradition in England, where they have the comedy and poetry and music together. And I've tried to create events where you see poetry, music, and you don't see one form as this high form. So on the one hand, I might say that poetry is like the highest form, but on the other hand, it's not, because it's just one form amongst many. And there's that kind of dialectic going on in my head about poetry and what it is. But yeah.
Finally, we don't have only to say thank you for being here as a guest.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful to be in Turku again, and I'm really, you know, I'm an international board member of Runoviikko now. I'm on the committee as well in a way, so I'm a guest. That's a guest. Sometimes they ask me for advice, and I'll collaborate with them, and I'm sure I'll be back again, because this is one of the most important collaborations in my life, and I'll be looking to take some more Finnish poets back to England as well. So, yeah, thanks. It's great to be here in my, really, in my other town.
Thank you. And I also thank you for watching. Until I meet you next time, accept my best wishes. This is Ahmed Zidanek greeting you from city of Turku in Finland. Goodbye.